I'm Rochelle Wilhite. I'm the designated broker of Best Choice Realty. And tonight we're going to be covering kind of FAQs. I feel like a firefighter today, except I've been putting out a lot of fires and a lot of challenges. And so tonight is a nice night where I can just kind of share with you some of the things that I'm seeing that can prevent some problems, prevent some fires before they actually start. We like that, fire prevention. Shannon should probably have a little firefighter on there on the left side of the screen, but we do have some visuals tonight. So if you are just dialing in on your phone, be sure and check out our YouTube. We will record this and put it on our YouTube channel. So if you miss something or you want to see the visual on it, be sure to check that out once we have this uploaded on YouTube. A couple housekeeping things. If you do have a question or you have a specific need, you have an earnest money dispute or anything that's a broker related matter, you can certainly just send me a message by text or in the chat window, and we'll be sure to ask that question or get an answer for you even after the call tonight. So with that, we'll get started. Thanks again for joining. And let's go to the first slide, Shannon. So tonight, as I discussed earlier, it's been a long day. I started this morning at 7 o'clock and I am still in the office at 6 o'clock. So it's been a very long day, putting out a lot of fires and helping a lot of you with some of the challenges you're experiencing with your contracts. I'm just going to go through my 4 hot buttons tonight, and then we'll get into some of the meat of tonight's session. But this is straight off of today. Just today alone, I have dealt with 22A, where our agent or the other agent did not understand when they fill out, when you, the broker, if you represent the buyer or if you represent the seller, you have a duty in that when you design or when you write up the 22A, you have a duty to your client to make sure you're properly communicating with that lender to make sure you're disclosing on the 22A term 1 the proper amount of down payment, whether it be 5%, 10%, 20%. Go on the low side. If you're not sure if they have the 20% down, then maybe do 10% or 5%. Whatever you can confirm with either the client or with the lender is what should be going on the 22A. We've had an incident. We've had multiple. This is one of many I've had to deal with in the past month, where our broker or the other broker did not understand what insufficient funds mean. There is a provision in the finance contingency that does not allow for that buyer to get the earnest money back if they've improperly disclosed the funds that they have readily available to complete the sale, such as I had 10% down. Some of it was a gift from my parents. And then I got a letter of loan denial from the lender saying that I could not perform the purchase and sale agreement because I did not have sufficient funds to close, meaning my mom decided she's not going to loan me the money anymore. That is not good and a good basis or good faith to allow for that buyer to get their earnest money back. We have had some instances where the sellers did concede or did give buyers their earnest money back, but not all the cases. It's a direct violation to the term in 22A. So there's an example below. If you look at the example below of a letter that I received October 27th from a letter of a lender that said that the buyer no longer has access to the gift funds he was going to receive for part of the down payment. Therefore, he no longer qualifies for his loan because of lack of funds. And this particular lender actually thought that this letter would get that buyer or that borrower their earnest money back, when in fact we are still debating who gets the earnest money on the release. So I get to handle a lot of those earnest money disputes, and what I can tell you is it really has a lot to do with the interest of the parties, what is provided, when it's provided, and how it's communicated. So anytime you have an incident where you're like, ooh, I don't know, what should I send? Should I send the notice of loan denial? Should I send over a 51 or a cancellation paperwork? Before you do that, you may want to give me a call so you can be up to speed with not only who we're working with on the other side, what their track record has been, how they typically communicate, and what the results usually are in those earnest money disputes. I deal with a lot more than you do on a regular basis. So the 22A. So that's one of the incidents. 22B, we are starting to see some 22Bs come in with offers. So we are seeing a rise in usage of a 22B. If you're not sure what a 22B is, if you're new to the real estate world, 22B is the home sale contingency form. That means I have to sell my home in order to buy your home. And so when I write up an offer, sometimes I will have to include a 22B if that is my case. So in those types of incidents, if you've never used a 22B before, whether you're on the listing side or on the buyer side, you might want to call me or review some of the past recordings and trainings that we've done on 22B on home sale contingencies. There's a lot of complexity, there's pertinent notices, and there's timelines that have to be met, whether you represent the listing as a seller, represent the seller as a listing agent or as a buyer's agent. There are some super, super important timelines that have to be met when you're using or when you're accepting or you're offering on the with using the 22B. So be sure you talk to me if that's your first time or if it's been a while. You want to make sure you understand your timelines and how to play the game. Buyer agency agreement, we've had some incidents. In fact, we have one right now that's super sad where the buyer actually went and was looking at properties with one of our agents, found a property. It was not even the first choice. It was our second choice. They got to the point where they lost out on another deal, no buyer agency agreement. But as we're writing the deal, as we're preparing the offer for consideration for the seller before the review date, which is tomorrow, we find out that the buyer actually works with the seller. I don't make this stuff up, you guys. They actually work with the seller. And so what this buyer and seller were attempting to do is cut the real estate agents out of the deal so that the real estate agents got paid zero commission. It really did happen. And it would have been so much better to be in that kind of fight, if you will, if we had it done we had a buyer agency agreement that outlined what our duties were and how we would get paid if, for example, the seller was trying to cut us out of the deal. So I worked on with the designated broker today on that at Remax. And end of the story is we may not get paid on that particular transaction because there is no buyer agency agreement in play. So be careful on some of those things. If you have not used a buyer agency agreement and you want to start incorporating that into your business, which some of you newer agents are doing a great job. I need to speak to some of our dinosaur agents, you know who I am, that maybe have not used an agency agreement, and we're starting to see more of those buyer agency agreements come across our desk. If you want to use the Best Choice Realty buyer agency agreement, it is much more protective, and it definitely outlines more specifics about that the seller is paying the buyer agency commission unless otherwise agreed upon. There is some language that covers that in our buyer agency agreement, not in the 41A, which the MLS has put together. So you have a choice. If you want to start incorporating buyer agency into your discussions with the buyer, when you start to go out and tour homes, when you're looking at off-market homes, when you're actually helping a buyer purchase, it might be very smart for you to go ahead and get a buyer agency agreement signed. Use the 41A or the Best Choice Realty buyer agency agreement that's in Transaction Desk. My last one, and I'll get off my soapbox, Shannon, and go to the next slide, would be, I get questions a lot about this as we start to see more people deciding whether, I don't know if I can find a house in Idaho or if I can find a house in Texas. And they seem to think that Washington state law allows them a contingency. There is not a seller contingency plan for a seller in the state of Washington. So when you have an instance like that, you need to advise that your seller cannot just decide halfway through the transaction, once they've got a buyer on the hook and they've gone through their inspection, or they haven't even gone through their inspection, they're contracted to purchase their home. They can't just decide to change their mind and decide that I can't find a house in Texas, so I'm not going to sell my house here in Washington. It does not work that way. They are obligated, and they can be sued for performance. That's what it's called, sued for performance. There have been instances where the buyers have seen the sellers. There was a situation that we had recently where the seller had cancer and was dying, and the buyer took a bit mercy on the situation and did allow for them to get their earnest money back and they wanted to be paid for their inspection money and their appraisal money to allow that seller to stay in the home. That was one instance where we did not sue for performance, and the parties came to an agreement on a Form 51, but that was not due to a seller contingency. That was due to circumstances that were out of the party's control. And luckily, we were willing to work with that seller in that instance. Anytime you have issues like that, where I want to back out, I want to cancel, and you have not experienced that, give me a call, text me, let me know it's a red hot or an SOS, and I will jump right on that and help you deal with that matter. We go to the next slide, personal sales. They are allowed. We actually did 60 of them last year. 60 personal sales out of 200 or 300 brokers that we had at Best Choice Realty. That's actually quite a lot of personal sales. We do allow them at Best Choice. We do have insurance for personal sales, but you have to disclose that you are a licensed real estate broker in the state of Washington. That is a requirement. It's in our contract, and it's something you need to make sure you disclose. So go ahead and on the 22D other or on a Form 34 before you close escrow, just make sure that you have properly disclosed. Some of you have asked me, is it proper disclosure just to put it on the agent remarks? No, that is just a marketing instrument that we use. That's not part of the contract. It is a requirement to make sure that that gets put into the contract in some shape or fashion. Form 34, 22D other, somewhere before you close escrow, make sure you indicate that to the parties. Next slide. Additional clients. A lot of you ask me, well, we're usually a text. I get a text a week lately with a lot of people who are using, I want to put mom on the purchase. I want to put the son on the purchase. If you want to add additional clients after you've got mutual acceptance, that is possible. You just need to use a 22Z, and the buyer and seller have to initial that addition. It's much easier to put everybody on the contract and take somebody off than to add somebody after mutual. So my strategy or tip of the day is, if you know you're going to be writing, say, with mom, dad, and maybe a son, might as well put all three of them on the contract. You'd have to put, mom and the husband on the first page of the purchase and sale, but maybe the son gets put on the 22Z and it's incorporated with the additional addenda on the purchase and sale agreement, so that the seller understands that the son is also a purchaser, and the escrow and title also know that the son is a purchaser, so they can properly pull title and work the file with all of the signers that are going to be signing on the purchase and sale. So don't wait if you can avoid it, but can it be done? Yes, it can be done after mutual. It just becomes a situation where you have to have both buyer and seller sign that addendum. Additional brokers, this would be something you would use. Shannon, you said you get this a lot. Tell me the instance you used this last week.
Yeah, I think, and anytime you have like a licensed transaction coordinator, if they're actually helping you with the transaction, some people have ones that will do that. Or if you've co-listed with someone, or you've got two buyer's agents that are working together on a mutual client, this is the form that you use to make sure that everybody gets equal credit on the MLS. And as I'm sure Rochelle's mentioned in previous calls, we take pride in our production numbers and our rankings. And this just ensures that when the deal closes, you get credit for the sale. So it goes towards kind of your little ticker at the end of the year that we can base, top producers and types of statuses and stuff on people.
Yeah, but it does not, just so I'm clear, Shannon, thank you for explaining how we use this form. This form does not establish agency. So when I talked about buyer agency agreement or a listing agreement, this does not establish agency. It's just a disclosure to the parties that there are multiple sales agents and multiple insurance companies that potentially could be held accountable for this purchase and sale agreement down the road. So that's what the form is used for. So if you are working with another broker and like say Windermere, we've done some co-listing with Windermere, they often have asked about, what kind of form are you guys okay with a 42A? Absolutely. We want to make sure that both firms are properly recognized and also that we have insurance for both companies. Okay, next slide. This one trips up a lot of the new brokers. I wanted to put this in here because I don't think we train this in our contract negotiation class, but it's super important that you guys all are aware of term 13. especially when you're starting to negotiate. And we're starting to see more negotiation happen between the buyers and the sellers. One of the areas of negotiation is term 13, which is talks about charges and assessments levied before but due after closing. Escrow will look at this and identify which box is checked, and they will put on the settlement statement or the cop, basically put on your closing statement what who is responsible for what fees. If it's assumed by buyer, they're going to put sewer capacity, homeowner dues, lid assessments, things of that nature, city type of fees that they assess. That will be assumed by the buyer before closing. If the box is checked prepaid in full by seller at closing, the seller would pay for those at closing. And anything that could potentially be seen as kind of that gray area, it really should be specified in the contract. But as you can see below in section H, it talks about anything on 22K, sewer capacity. They've added some language in there, which I'm happy they did. Many of you that are maybe new to the contracts or didn't realize they added this, they did put that in section H when it talks about local improvement districts, sewer capacity. It's right in the contract. You don't need to put it on a 22D other unless there's something that, maybe you guys are splitting that sewer capacity or you're splitting that homeowner assessment. Something like that would need to be spelled out specifically on an addendum. But for the most part, here's section H, here's number 13, who's responsible, buyer or seller. Okay, sewer capacity charge is something that you need to be, if you're going to work in King County, you got to know what sewer capacity charge. Spokane, you don't have to worry about sewer capacity charge, but they may start to do that. A lot of the counties start to follow the bigger counties. And as in the 1990s, that's anything built after 1990, most likely there is a sewer capacity charge or a remaining balance. That would be something you go to kingcounty.gov on, and you can understand what capacity is, why we have it, who has to pay. And it says right here, February 1st, 1990. I wasn't off. I thought it was in the 1990s. They pay the capacity charge. So the builder, when they build the home and they issue the permits, actually gets assessed a sewer capacity. Most of the new construction that you do here in Washington, they address sewer capacity in the builder's contract. So if you're going to do new construction in any of the areas or any of the counties, you might want to look to see if they have anything about sewer capacity or charges that are assessed to that buyer. A lot of builders have become smart over the years and realize they can actually charge the buyer for that fee. There's a sample of invoice. There's the past due. So King County actually, it's wastewater treatment division. That remaining balance, look at that, $9,310. That might be a good question you ask the seller if the home is built after 1990. Hey, did you get anything? What do you owe on your sewer capacity? And that may be factored into how you do your pricing, is how you're going to set that up. Is the seller going to pay for that? Or is the buyer going to assume that? And you work that into your numbers. But treat that as just kind of like some of those things you do when you were working with the seller to understand. There is another circuit breaker in the Form 17, and this is what you see here. And my client actually made a mistake a few years back. They indicated in the Form 17, Section C, says, is the property subject to any sewage system fees or charges in addition to those covered in your regularly billed sewer or on-site sewage system maintenance? And they said no. So when I cannot advise, this is another reminder, you cannot advise on how a buyer or how a seller interprets or fills out your Form 17. I cannot advise on that. So if my seller said, Rochelle, how should I answer Section C? I cannot advise. My only advice was you should probably get any kind of documents that you have, any receipts that you have, and then answer the question truthfully. So he put no. We wrote the contract, we had the buyer assume, but after close of escrow, buyer got that bill, of the next sewer assessment that was due, got themselves an attorney, and that was the letter that the attorney sent my seller. I represent them, the buyers of the above property. You are the blank agent. My clients recently were surprised to discover that there is a sewer capacity charge. I had to forward this letter to my seller, and unfortunately they had to pay, I think it was $6,000 to clear up that sewer capacity charge. And it was just a simple checkbox. So it's a quick reminder, do not advise that your client fill out, you can't fill it out for them, but you certainly can't, and you can't advise them on how to fill it out, but you should make sure that they read the question thoroughly and answer to the best of their knowledge. And if they don't know, they shouldn't answer yes or no. They should put don't know, and let that buyer figure it out. That would have saved my seller $6,000. There's an example of a lid or a HOA, kind of a neighborhood got together in Newcastle, and they assessed a $13.02 per month. We got almost to closing and found out that the seller had to pay that, and it became a very sticky point. And the seller almost walked away from the deal and had a major litigation issue over something that was $13.02 per month that the seller had to pay. They had to pay off that lamp post. So I call it my lamp post lesson when it comes to capacity charges or assessments that are due. Before this was assessed, but it's not paid until it was assessed actually after the close of escrow. But because that box was checked, the seller had to prepay in full. Escrow had to assess that $13.02 and figure out what the total amount of that lamppost was going to cost and assess that on the closing statement for the seller. It would have been so much better if the seller would have told me when I listed the property, hey, we have the HOA has been talking about this lamppost. They actually sent me a bid. Here's how much that they've agreed upon in the HOA minutes and meeting. But the seller failed to give me that information. So at the end of the day, they actually had to pay a lot of money for this lamppost that they did not get the benefit for. And it would have been better if we would have known about this when we started to negotiate the offer that came in. Okay, LID is local improvement district, and we can talk about that later. Septic systems also is a sticky point. There are many counties, and every county has their own way of handling septic systems. First thing you want to do on a 22D is to indicate on your offer, if you're representing the buyer, what does the MLS listing say? Is it on sewer, or is it on septic, or is it on both? There are areas like of Squim and over in the peninsula that actually have both. That's something new I learned a couple years ago. So you do want to make sure that you properly disclose what the property has, and then that will lead me as your broker to look over your contract and help you in identifying what kind of forms you would need, or what kind of certificates or county certificates you would need before you close escrow to make sure you're compliant with the state laws and with the county and with the city. So applications have to be reviewed, technical review. Right now I've got one that has a deficiency that the seller is having to pay over $10,000 for. Shannon doesn't know about this one. This is, my mom is buying a property and it's $10,000 to fix the septic system. Thank goodness we had a septic contingency that said that they had to have it reviewed by the county. The county is not able to certify it because of the deficiencies that the pumper noted on their report. If you want to check, this is another top tip, or a pro tip, as my kids used to say, Mom, what's the pro tip on this one? The pro tip is you can go to onlinerme.com. That is a website that you can go to. Not everything is on there. Not everything is recorded, but for the most part, I'm starting to see the counties reporting to the online RME so that you can actually look up the as-built, look up the past records. If you have a listing agent that's not very good, you can often go in and see what's been reported and when it's been pumped. Or if you're just trying to check on something, maybe it's a foreclosure, you're wanting to see what has been reported. That has been very helpful for a lot of you. And it's a top tip for many top producers. They'll onlinerme.com, they'll go in and set up an account for themselves. They can look up anything that's been reported. Not a foolproof, but it definitely, we're moving in the right direction with online storage.
And just to pipe in, you don't actually need an account. All of the stuff on online RME is public record. So you should be able to just do a report search based off of the property address. Or
the tax ID, I think. But we have run into situations where the county did not report. So again, it's not 100% accurate, but it's definitely, if you don't know and you want to just do a quick check, it sometimes helps in negotiations quite a bit. Yes, thanks, Guy. I just saw that pop up. Always get the septic inspected before listing. That's another pro tip. Of course, it comes from one of our top producers, and having that done saves a lot of time and effort and knowing and having problems with the septic after the fact. So get that done. And then you can also include that in your supplements when you list the property. Last thing I'll cover with you guys is the attention buyer's disclosure in a seller's market. We did this several months ago. It's, I think, Shannon, at the beginning of the year. I'm trying to remember. Maybe it was almost a year.
We released this and put it on Transaction Desk for everybody to access. It's also on our website. We put this together about the same time that the forms had their revisions in March.
Okay, so it's not been even an entire year. Many of you didn't know we even had it, or you see it in the supplements or in the Transaction Desk. What is this? Is it a requirement at Best Choice Realty? As we start to transition into a more balanced market, what we are seeing is we actually are seeing a lot more cold feet. In the last 30 days, I've noticed more of that in the last 30 days for not only sellers, but for buyers. So it is very important as you're working with your buyers that they don't have cold feet and you properly advise them or educate them on how to structure their offer and what are the repercussions of some of those choices. I like how it kind of goes through if you waive this or if you don't waive that, some examples of some contingencies, cash offer versus not a contingent offer. It kind of gives you some considerations and lets the buyer understand that there are some repercussions in the choices that they're making with you in writing the offer. We had recently happen, and one of our top producers had an incident where the buyer just changed their mind. You know, they waived their inspection, they waived everything, and they walked away from several thousands of dollars. It might have been upwards of $20,000. I'm trying to remember how much it was. But we've had that happen not only with that top producer, but with other brokers as well, where their buyer just, they got nervous, or they heard from the neighbor about something that was going to go on the market that might have been better, and they're walking away from the table. And so they're losing their earnest money. In those type of instance, when there's no legal basis for termination or no contingency, then the earnest money is the only aspect that is protecting the seller from that default. So make sure that your buyers are well aware of the contingencies that we put into a contract and that they have been advised about some of these things and what the repercussions are, that they could lose their earnest money. And so maybe they don't want to ask for, put up $100,000 earnest money check. Maybe they want to kind of pull that back a little bit. Maybe they want to waive everything, but they just don't put up as much earnest money. Again, we're going to start to see some adjustment. And I think the first place to turn when you want to do a better job at doing a buyer consultation is to just pull up this form and just kind of go over this before you put the offer in place, before you type everything up on Authentisign or Transaction Desk, especially if they have not written an offer. Maybe this is the first thing you do, so that they're not writing like 5 offers. Some of you are writing a ton of offers. On average, we're writing about 3 to 4 offers before one gets accepted. That's our office average. I'd love to cut that down a bit more. And I think the way we do that as a team or as a firm is we do more education with our buyers to help them structure their offer so that they can win. And there are ways to do that, but there are some considerations. And then once you go over this form, we did provide it just like the wire fraud alert, a place where they could initial, or some of the other disclosures they could initial. There is a place you can have them initial, and that just shows you that you've done your job at advising them of some of these contingencies and what protects them, and they've chosen to waive. And this is a good thing to have in your file. If you want to start using this form, I would incorporate that into your buyer consultation package. When you go over that nice, pretty buyer consultation, and they're ready to write the offer, I would kind of like be between buyer consultation and offer negotiation is where I would kind of put this disclosure. And I think that will help you in maybe getting stronger offers written out the gate, and also preventing buyer's remorse, and even sellers just understanding kind of how it goes, what we could do if we're going to price at this level, what we need to anticipate that we might be looking at as far as offers. And this form is found on Transaction Desk. It is also found in the bestchoicerealtyhomes.com in the download section. So if you have an account with bestchoicerealtyhomes.com, you can download this and you can have that available at any time. Okay.
And we've got a couple of questions, Rochelle, if that's okay. I know a couple of people sent them to me privately, and that's okay. I'll just say them for them. And then just to echo, I think what you said too on how you can provide this to your clients. We had a call, I think we did about a month ago, on how to properly do and provide disclosures to buyers and also sellers. And just to echo you, it's really that in between when you're meeting them in person, and then also before you're writing an offer. And the way that I know that you and I do it is we like to send it in a follow-up email to our clients after we've met with them, along with all of the law of agency disclosures and pamphlets and everything else that they would need for Washington State.
Right.
So first off, one of the questions that we had is right out of the gate is if buyers are waiving their financing, where do they disclose the percentage of down payment to the parties?
22EF is the form you would use. And I do a webinar on that, on writing an offer that's financed, but you'd have no finance contingency. I did do that several months ago. So you could probably find that on the YouTube channel it's in a different color. We probably need to put that out to everybody. We're actually going to talk about that next week. So I'm kind of spoiling my content for next week, but certainly 22EF, to answer the question, indicate what kind of financing it is. Is it hard money? Is it different types of private funds? Is it from Bank of America? Is it from wherever that is? You actually don't have to indicate if you are waiving your finance contingency and you're just disclosing where the funds are coming from. You actually do not have to state that on the 22EF. You can just not have the 22A. That in essence is waiving the finance contingency. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, and I think just another question that I know I got over the weekend, so I just want to be very, very clear. A lot of people get mixed up between, on the 22EF, what's the difference between non-contingent funds and contingent funds?
Non-contingent funds and contingent funds. That is, you can use, the reason that header kind of throws people off is because you can use a 22EF to counter when you want to actually prove where those funds are coming from. So you can actually use a 22A and a 22EF. Most brokers don't. So it's kind of an old header in that section, Shannon. So I would say for that type of situation, if it's not cash, you don't fill in that first term. But on the second one, you do. You check the box and disclose where the funds are coming from. But it's not a contingency, even though it says it's contingent funds. It's contingent on the funds actually being at escrow. It's not a contingency for the buyer to get their earnest money back. That's not what that's for, and that's not what it means. I know that's confusing. That makes sense? Or we probably need to look at the 22EF.
Yeah. And I've just got, it's really random. So it's like, if you guys have a question, you're welcome to throw it in the chat, and I'm welcome to take that and pose that to Rochelle. But another question we got is buyer status on the first page. Am I required to put it? Am I not required it? You know, I'm assuming they're meaning the one where it says unmarried or married.
They're taking title. You're helping title and escrow, which they would say yes. Does it prevent you from getting mutual acceptance? No. However, it would be nice to have, as far as, how are they taking title? That is something that you really should get in the habit of making sure you fill out. I catch it. So I'll send you an email and say, hey, we need to disclose that. And then it needs to be an addendum. So some escrow companies are really fussy. Others are not. It just is important to have that there to make it easier on everybody on how the parties are taking title.
Okay, perfect. And then another question that we've had recently, I wouldn't say a lot. So a couple of agents have gotten their lender license.
Yes.
How do I properly disclose that to the parties?
Then that's a great question. That would be an instance where you surely want to use the buyer agency agreement. We have an addendum to the buyer agency agreement that our attorney has drafted that says, yes, I am, or no, I'm not. It is a checkbox that you would want to do. That is the language that our attorney has provided for you to use. I have seen some other ones floating around, and I can't speak for those types of situations, whether that would cover you or not. What I can tell you is that my attorney, who I've retained on retainer, And every year I work through issues, and I haven't, knock on wood, haven't had any issues with lenders that are also licensed with Best Choice Realty. And we have several. It's not that you guys are the only one. If you're feeling like I'm the only one, you're not the only one. Just make sure that you are properly disclosing, and you should actually have a buyer agency agreement with every buyer that you work with to disclose that. We had an incident where, we're a lender, but we also were a seller. In that case, you wouldn't have, this disclosure, but you probably should disclose in that transaction that you have a active lending license. I don't think there's anything wrong with disclosure. I think that lets the parties know that you have an active license in that kind of scope of business as well. So I would say over disclose on that fact, and that has always served us well. But there is a buyer agency provision. There is a lending provision on the buyer agency. So use our agency agreement, not the 41A.
And how often do you use a buyer agency agreement, Rochelle, just so they have a reference?
75% of the time. So not all of the time, but 75% of the time. It's just when I'm doing a buyer consultation, I just throw it into the mix, right? So it's not a difficult thing to do. I think it's the times when when you know that the relationship is solid. Like if I was selling Shannon a house, do I need to have a buyer agency agreement? No. I mean, she knows that she's going to, we have that loyalty and that trust. You have to get to a point in the relationship where you have that loyalty and trust, and then it's just easy to get them to sign it. It's the apprehension that a lot of you guys have where it's like, oh, I don't want them to sign this, but then you're basically running without an agreement, and you could be showing them a lot of homes. So you could run the risk of losing all your commission, all your hard-earned money.
Yeah, so, I think part of it too is when you have an actual agreement. I think most people, when they're working with any sort of contractor, there's an agreement, and this industry really is no different. It does kind of lend credibility and also professionalism when you do have an agreement, and it shows value in what you're doing.
Yeah.
You should know your value.
I never do. Do I do a buyer consultation with every client? Well, people I've had relationships with, right, where I've done some sales, I don't need to have a buyer agency agreement because they have some proven history with that person. It's the people that I do a buyer consultation with that I've been taught with a coach on how to introduce that buyer agency agreement so that it's fluid. It's a no-brainer. Just like you said, Shannon, it's like a professional service agreement that they need to sign in order for me to know that they're serious about working with me. So as much as they're vetting me, I'm vetting them. And it actually goes well when you do it in that place. It's when you try to introduce a buyer agency agreement, when you have not built rapport, that it can backfire on you. And I think that's where agents mostly fear. It's like, oh, I don't want them to sign because I really haven't built enough trust, or I haven't taken them out to look at enough properties. Start from the very beginning and establishing your value from the moment you actually do that consultation, and then introduce the buyer agency agreement. You'll have 100% signings when you do it that way.
And I think one of the agents that are on the call was asking where we can find this buyer disclosure. And it's, again, just to reiterate, it's on transaction desk. It should be in the documents section. When you're sending any sort of signing to a client, it should be in there. It also is located on our website at bestchoicerealtyhomes.com, and it's in the download section once you've logged in. And another question came through asking whether or not we'll get this translated at some point. I know that it's, we've had a couple people ask for that. So just stay tuned, I would say, in the next 6 months.
If you are willing, if you have that skill set, I would definitely want to utilize some of your help in creating this and getting it done quickly. If I have to rely on a translator, it will take forever. So if you have that skill set, please let Shannon know. And then that way we can work with your content. I know we have some Korean speaking brokers and some Chinese speaking brokers and Latino. We need this translated. So this is very important information. And then I saw your note, Deanna. I hear you on the buyer agency agreement needs more teeth. We need more agents using the buyer agency agreement. So we have some precedent. There's not a lot of case law in Washington for buyer agency agreements. And I think we're going to see more of that as the market transitions. So I hear you. I think there needs to be more a bit more, and we're pushing that from our angle. The Remax broker I spoke with today, she and I both are in agreement that it needs more teeth. And we're going to push forward to try to get some changes made, even in the 41A. Our buyer agency agreement's a bit better, but that needs more teeth. I agree. Commissions kept separate for lending and brokerage. Yes, that is correct. And is there anything else, Shannon, or was that it?
Nope. That was all the questions that we had come through.
Well, you guys did okay. I told Shannon, I said, I almost feel like you guys could do a battle of the brokers right now, where we could have managing brokers and you guys could ask questions, and no questions about a bad question. There haven't been stumped yet on some of your questions. And certainly if I was, I have an attorney that I can turn to. But have a great week, you guys. And next Monday, we'll cover a bit more on the multiple offer situation. Some of you need some extra help on that. There are still multiple offers everywhere. We're still seeing them. Have a great week.